He knew he must wipe out these people, these scum from society.
But is it really worth risking your life?
Yes, I think so.
Some parents are very worried indeed. In fact, some have gone so far as to take their daughters away.
Can you predict when the Ripper might strike again?
Not at all. Could be in 10 years, could be next week, could be right now.
Vicky was last spotted waiting here for a bus to Falkirk. She'd never made the journey from her sister's house through Bathgate before and was anxious to get home.
Is Tobin a sociopath or is he a psychopath?
All psychopaths are manipulative. They are impulsive, they're very cunning. They will use people as a means to an end.
Jackie Hill was a respectable girl, a student studying to be a probation officer. She'd been just a few hundred yards from her student hostel in Leeds when Sutcliffe attacked. He'd hit her 5 times with a large ball-peen hammer. Sutcliffe struck her on the back of the head and then dragged her onto some waste ground where he stabbed her repeatedly, once right through the eye. I thought she was staring at me, he was later to tell police. The Attorney General also showed the jury her blood-stained handbag. It had been found on the pavement and police had been called. But although they'd searched the area, they failed to find her body, and it was discovered by a passerby the next day.
Why are you walking on your own? That makes you an easy target. You're literally asking to be attacked. As far as Sutcliffe was concerned, you're a lowlife, and I literally use you as a doormat.
Peter Sutcliffe, an English serial killer, brutally took the lives of 13 women and attempted to murder 7 more between 1975 and 1980. His reign of terror led to 20 life sentences, later converted to a whole life order in 2010, ensuring he would never leave prison. Sutcliffe was described as cold, calculating, and sexually sadistic. Initially, Sutcliffe's attacks targeted women in residential areas, but soon he shifted his focus to the red light districts, preying on sex workers he believed to be more vulnerable. His actions were driven by a twisted perception of their worth, a belief disturbingly reinforced by the police, who considered these women less innocent than others.
The police were saying he was cleaning up the streets of prostitutes, and I hate to say it, but a lot of the macho working men's clubs were kind of, yeah, one down. It wasn't the best environment. It was a very misogynistic environment. It was rather disgusting that these people who had to work on the streets and they were sex workers were positioned as, yeah, well, you deserved it. And how could that be? So one bunch of people were deserving of being killed while other women weren't deserving of it? How does that pan out? How does that play out? But that's the way it was at the time. That's how the way the police positioned. Well, you're on the streets and you're a sex worker, you're asking for it.
The one thing that we must remember is every single victim of Sutcliffe, of any killer, of any abuser, of sex workers or not, are all innocent. Nobody deserves or should be in that position in the first place. And certainly being abused to that point and killed to that point, they are absolute innocent victims. They weren't doing anything that they wanted to do, the sex workers. They were doing it because they had to do because of the economic situation at the time. So they had no part in what happened to them whatsoever. That should really, really be emphasised.
Amongst the parties, the late-night drinking and the walks home, Leeds in the 1970s was described as a time of great desperation, where curfews took over and protests hit the streets.
Representatives of the English Collective of Prostitutes and other feminist groups arrived at the Old Bailey. They carried placards and shouted slogans claiming that lawyers in the Ripper case appeared to be condoning the murder of prostitutes by referring to later victims as totally respectable girls. They also blamed the press for sometimes referring to these victims as being innocent.
In the 1970s, people were really desperate. They were on their uppers. What would have traditionally been a sort of like a nuclear family, if you like. Dad went out to work, there was no work, but the money still needed to be earned. So a lot of women turned to what they thought was a quick fix, which was prostitution. And some of them were actually encouraged by their partners as well to do this because it was instant money for them. No woman turns to prostitution or selling their body out of choice or out of want. So these were desperate times for a lot of desperate people.
Nowadays there's 2, 3 of you. If one gets in the car, there's always a registration number taken, colour of the car taken. So the girls always see, well in Bradford anyway, the girls always take the precautions for each other.
Well, I'm very frightened, but it's just, you've got to do it, and yeah, you need the money, so it's another way I'm going to get it, so I'll do it that way.
But is it really worth risking your life?
Yes, I think so. Just hope I'm lucky.
This flawed view from the authorities of women being less innocent than others became one of many grave mistakes that allowed Sutcliffe's killing spree to continue unchecked. When he had already claimed 10 lives, the investigation took an even disastrous turn, fixating on a hoaxer known as Wareside Jack.
The head of the Ripper squad, George Oldfield, revealed a secret kept under wraps for over a year. Letters from the Ripper himself, and also a recording of his voice.
I'm Jack. I see you are still having no luck catching me. I have the greatest respect for you, George. But Lord, you are no nearer catching me now than 4 years ago when I started.
The voice of Wearside Jack, the man police thought was the Yorkshire Ripper, but who wasn't.
Even if this were not the murderer, which I believe it is, this man is a very dangerous man in any case. This is very much a violent man.
So everyone's thinking, well, there's that, and they're showing that they're doing something, because before that, they didn't show that they were doing anything. So I thought, well, we'll put on this big performance with a PR stunt that it was, and show the people of Leeds and Yorkshire and other areas that we found him, and this is what we're doing to try and wheedle him out. People would know his voice and his handwriting. We all thought, well, yeah, but they're obviously still doing further investigations, aren't they? This is just obviously a front. No. Really? No. They stopped the investigation.
John Samuel Humble, the man behind the hoax, led detectives on a wild goose chase, diverting them from the real killer. His letters and audio tapes misled investigators and caused the investigation to collapse, all while Sutcliffe continued his rampage.
How can a whole police force think that one person that was the Yorkshire Ripper? So they put all their eggs in one basket and went on telly and did this whole performance, only to find that it was an absolute hoax, even though they had been told.
He was found 25 years later in 2006 and sentenced to 8 years in prison.
He should have got life, because he was saying he was Scotch or Geordie or whatever, but no. But then again, the police force thought it was, hence to say, when it all come out, it was a hoax. He should have got life. Not just 8 years like he got, he should have got life. He caused a lot more murders.
The real Yorkshire Ripper was Peter Sutcliffe. He would batter his victims with a hammer as well as stabbed and mutilated them with a knife or a sharpened screwdriver. A spree that was believed to be targeted on sex workers as they entered his vehicle took an even darker turn when a woman aged just 16 was attacked from behind as she was just walking home from work. No woman was safe.
Last night in Leeds, public dissatisfaction with the police performance so far found a voice, albeit a rather extreme one. Hundreds of feminists marched through the city demanding that the police should put a 9 o'clock curfew on men until the Ripper is caught. That may seem a trifle bizarre, But the fact is that thousands of women are already under their own self-imposed curfew. As the feminists were marching, students like Vicky Shiner were on their way home, hours earlier than usual. No one wants to be out after dark, particularly girls like Vicky, who lives in the same block of student flats as Jacqueline Hill, the latest victim of the Ripper. The girls are frightened, so too are their parents.
Some parents are very worried indeed. In fact, some have gone so far as to take their daughters away, which I think is a little extreme. But I can understand why they should be so worried. It must seem to them that the area is crawling with murderers.
Do you, in fact, have any sort of fear at all?
Yes, but I'm more afraid for other people than for myself.
Why is that?
Well, as usual, I don't think it's going to happen to me because I shall be so careful that it won't happen to me. But I am afraid for other people because I believe he will strike again.
At night, the police have every man available out on the streets, even though for the most part they're deserted. But their presence alone and their search for a lead cannot ease the common fear of the unknown. Just if, when and where the Ripper will kill again.
Peter Sutcliffe was raised in a household where women were expected to be docile and men taught to respect them. But his father, described as a monster, provided a far more violent example. Domestic abuse was common in the Sutcliffe home, witnessed firsthand by his siblings.
His dad organised to meet, he pretended to be somebody else and led his mum, Kathleen, on to come to this hotel room where he was waiting for her to expose her as a potential adulteress. And pulling out of her newly packed bag, she'd got a sort of like a nice pretty nightie or negligee, and he pulled this out and he did this and he took a couple of the children along, including Peter, to prove to the point, because of course we have this situation where Peter, and probably his other siblings as well, because she did the best for them, thought very highly of their mother. And the dad wanted to take her down and show what a terrible person she was in front of the children. So it was kind of an act of revenge, it was an act of ego boosting for himself, but it was to also prove to them that their mother was this infallible and duplicitous creature. And you must dislike her as much as you all seem to dislike me, not actually taking any responsibility for his actions, of course. He was unpredictable. They didn't know kind of what dad would be walking through the door. Was it going to be nice dad? Was it going to be happy dad? Was it going to be violent, angry dad? So an incident that comes to mind is when round the table, dad sits at one end of the table, he's in charge. And for whatever reason, Peter was sitting in his chair. Now, he might have just been doing it as a bit of joking, or he might have been led to do it by one of his siblings or as a dare or something like that. But whatever it was, his dad took real umbrance at this. His ego was being, challenged by his son, or so he believed. So he took a really quick and violent action to not only make sure that that didn't happen again from Peter, but to make sure the rest of the siblings knew about it as well.
As a boy, he grew extremely attached to his mother, a bond that would later shape his distorted views on women.
He put her on a pedestal. He thought that she was the absolute optimum of what women should be. However, he also knew that she had flaws. She had affairs. She put up with the awful domestic violence that she got from his father, that he would have witnessed quite a few times. So that gave him, from a very, very early age, that conflict that I believe is really at the heart of what Peter Sutcliffe was about. He had the perfect person in his mother, but she was imperfect as well. But he couldn't, of course, take that out on her because she was this perfect person, and he wanted to maintain that. So then he puts that all onto other people. When Peter was younger, again, he's got this kind of idolised image of his mother. He's put her on a pedestal. And when he sees her in a social situation and she's just chatting to other men, which infuriated John, his father, because actually she's his wife and she shouldn't even be looking, let alone talking to other men. So in front of everybody, again, he has to make his statement, which is to go up to her and abuse her, to slap her, to make sure, one, she knows not to do that again, and two, everybody else knows not to do that again. Again, it's a little bit reminiscent of the time that Peter was sitting in his chair and he hit him over the head with a glass to make the statement to everybody. He's making this statement, the ownership statement, that she is not allowed to do that and they are not allowed to talk to her as well. So again, that just adds to the feelings, the emotions, that damped down stuff that Peter Sutcliffe has had from really an early time in his life about what his mother is like. She was a normal person. She was just chatting to men, but she didn't like, his father didn't like it. And what her response to that was it to acquiesce to the father? Undoubtedly so. And again, that just added to that sense of, conflict and annoyance and aggravation that he can't do anything with because he loves his mother. And I've got to do something with it. There's got to be an outlet. And these vulnerable people, I'm just going to hit them on the back of the head and do what I like with them, believing that they're that bit of my mother that I can't access. I'll access it with you, but I won't access it with her.
Bullied at school for his small frame and skinny legs, Sutcliffe became withdrawn and developed an unsettling obsession with death. As a young man, he took work as a gravedigger, where his dark fantasies began to manifest.
So Peter Sutcliffe's, he left school with, very few or poor educational qualifications, and he started working in manual labour. So a go-to job for a lot of men of his age in that area was to become a lorry driver, delivering things, maybe a long-distance lorry driver, or maybe just locally. But he also worked as a gravedigger. Now, I think this probably tapped into his fascination with bodies, with dead bodies, what he could do with them. Now, obviously, by the time they come to a cemetery, the caskets are all sealed, so he probably didn't actually see that many dead bodies, but he probably would have heard lots of stories in graveyards about what happens and what goes on there as well. So that would have been a point of fascination for him. Particularly, he wanted to look at the library, the books that would talk about venereal disease. So he was quite fascinated in the female form and what possibly could go wrong with it. So he was, there was an obsession there, and obviously something that he wouldn't have talked about to any of his family members or any of his school peers or anything. So it was something that was kept deep and dark within him that festered into the actions that he took later.
It was during this time that Sutcliffe claimed to have heard the voice of God, telling him to rid the world of prostitutes. It was also claimed that he was schizophrenic, a lie that police seem to have believed, and so a brutal spree of murders began, leaving 13 women dead and countless others in fear.
Well, I think you'd have to be mad to kill like that, so whatever term you chuck at it, paranoid schizophrenia, narcissist, insane, no empathy. I mean, you can just chuck any name at it. Obviously, there was a mental illness there. You shouldn't confuse acts against, your own moral compass and ideas of what's right and wrong. They can't be conflicting. You're either right or wrong, whatever illness that you have, whatever mental illness you have, in whatever capacity. He was plain wrong. And his actions were evil. But they took that paranoid schizophrenia to try and explain why he did what he did. But it transpires that his wife was paranoid schizophrenia, so he knew how to try and represent himself in that way. So he used her medication terms and her treatments as though that's what he needed. So they foolishly fell for that.
Peter Sutcliffe's rampage finally came to an end in 1981, after years of eluding capture.
Well, earlier the court had heard details of his arrest. He'd been in a car in Sheffield with a prostitute and had been taken away for questioning. He didn't crack during a night at Hamerton Road police station. But then one of the arresting officers, Sergeant Bob Ring, had a hunch. He remembered that Sutcliffe had asked if he could go to relieve himself. He went back to the spot, and there he found the tools exactly where Sutcliffe had hidden them. Well, when Sutcliffe was confronted with this, the following conversation took place between Sutcliffe and the detective. "I think you're leading up to something," said Sutcliffe. "Leading up to what?" "I think you're leading up to the Yorkshire Ripper," said Sutcliffe. "What about the Yorkshire Ripper?" said the detective. "Well," said Sutcliffe, "it's me."
I felt shocked when the Ripper was caught because we'd all kind of gotten used to living in this weird, he'll never be caught because he got away with so much, he's going to escape, he's just going to carry on, this is what life is like, because it went on for a number of years, this intense fear of going out, and the curfew was, you know, still on at the time, and I was like, oh my God, thank God, he's off the streets. Women can go out again. The curfew will stop, you know. Phew. It was a massive relief when he was caught. And then it unfolded that he was only caught by a couple of coppers who were doing their rounds and saw suspicious licence plates on his car and questioned him. And then that's how he was caught. So none of the detective work, I don't think you'd be too good to call them detectives at the time, was really working. It was just PC Plod who found him. That was a bit, oh, well, what were they all doing then? If it came to that, to find him. And that's how everything then unfolded.
Can you tell us whether he has a Geordie accent?
I cannot tell you that because I've not heard him speak.
Can you give us any details?
But I can tell you that we are absolutely delighted with developments at this stage. Absolutely delighted.
The lack of understanding, the police's mishandling of everything, them not taking women seriously, not taking their ground force seriously.
Can you all smile? Really delighted. Can you get a bit closer? George is delighted as well.
And it all slowly came out over the years.
Can you come over, George? Yes, absolutely delighted. Yes.
The Yorkshire Ripper, 13 lives lost, a nation shaken, and an investigation plagued by failure.
At the time that he was caught, everyone was baying to bring back hanging. Everyone was baying to kill him, bring back the death sentence, because that's what people thought he deserved, to be killed. I'm glad he wasn't, because then he confessed to further other attacks. And also, it showed what had gone wrong with the police. His existence allowed that conversation to continue to this day.
Retired told me she's certain all of Sutcliffe's victims were never identified.
I'm certain there were other victims, absolutely positive. I myself interviewed one, but the Chief Constable, Mr. Gregory, said that we had enough on our plate and it would not be recognised as a Ripper attack.
And I can tell you that we are absolutely delighted, really delighted, absolutely delighted.